April 25th, 2015, the Ochelli Effect, as the bumper tells you. I'm your host, Chuck Ochelli. So we are live, and tonight we are going to dismantle an interesting JFK myth. We're going to actually do part 3 of the JFK mythology series on my show, and yes, I am continuing with this. But tonight we're going to focus on a singular myth that seems to encompass a whole lot of other sub-myths, if you will. So it's like dismantling, debunking, or demolishing the master myth. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of history as to why I give a crap about this and why it is that I'm not spending all my time just focusing on the Warren Commission, which I could do. And I could sit here just demolishing all of the official explanations regarding this situation. I could do that. That would be advantageous to me, but you know what? Unfortunately, I feel as though I have to clean up my own house, okay, regarding the conspiracy theorist side of things, and I have to debunk a lot of the garbage out there, because every single time that I am engaged in a conversation off the air regarding the JFK assassination, it continues to be thrown at me, all of this misdirection and nonsense that is out there. So we waited for the 3rd episode to begin to deconstruct for you live on the air what we do refer to kind of privately as the master myth. Why? Because, as I said before, it completely rolls into it a whole plethora of nonsense, easily debunked garbage that is out there. And of course, I have the return assistance of my wonderful panel. Plus, we're going to have another interesting guy join us in just a little bit. But that panel, of course, includes Carmine Savastano from Neapolis Media Group, also the guy who was working on the book it is called Two Princes and a King, and of course there is a website for that and everything else, and if you went to the Facebook events page, you would know all about that because we provided plenty of links and plenty of articles. So Carmine is on with me. How you doing tonight, Carmine?
Pretty good. How you doing, Chuck?
Sounding a hell of a lot better this time, too.
Thanks.
Actually, it's only because he got a headset and everything else, so I think that you're going to come across a whole lot better like that, brother.
Good. I hope so.
Also, by the way, an administrator at the Ochelli Effect Facebook page, and also at the Ochelli Effect radio page for discussion on Facebook as well. Thank you for that. To the delight
and chagrin of some.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And in addition, of course, we have Trish Fleming and Zach Gendro they work at the Debunked blog, but they do a lot of other things and a lot of interesting articles. And these guys actually dig into real information, real evidence, real documentation on occasion, unlike those who buy into the Judyth Vary Baker story. Zach, Trish, how are you guys tonight?
Good. How you doing?
Hey, Chuck.
Always a pleasure to have you guys on. So, and at some point, Glenn Vikland will join us as well. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
I believe so.
Interesting guy. Very interesting guy. Very reasonable guy who happened to study one of the pieces, the evolution of the Judyth Vary Baker myth, you know, her whole thing of having to seek political asylum in other countries in order to avoid what? The oppressive U.S. government that was out to silence her and all of the death threats and things that were against her.
until she came back to sell the book.
Look, I tried to say it with a straight face. I just couldn't make it. I couldn't make it. I couldn't.
I'm really going to try not to laugh tonight, but it's going to be really hard.
Oh, yes it is. Yes it is. And look, I'm going to mention a particular individual that absolutely motivated this particular episode, and I'm going to mention him once, and then that's going to be the end of the discussion on this guy. But, you know, a particularly nasty little alternative radio person out there who calls himself, you know, names himself with a cartoon character's name, Popeye.
Which is strangely appropriate.
Which is strangely appropriate, yes. Popeye, this guy got extremely nasty with me personally a few years ago, decided to tell me that pretty much I was an idiot and I needed to do 5 minutes worth of research to understand exactly how valid Judyth's entire story was and how much, you know, he knew. And of course, this is the guy who I previously mentioned, but didn't mention him by name, had told me that I needed to check with people like Jim Fetzer, Ed Haslam, and James Douglas, because these people all back Judyth's story. Now, what Popeye was not aware of is that at the time in my cell phone, I did have Jim Douglas's home number, because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? The whole reason why you have a JFK and the Unspeakable audiobook is because I complained to Jim Douglas that I was having trouble reading his book. Okay, I'm actually one of the inspirations for the creation of that, and Jim did it himself. It wasn't Simon & Schuster. Notice it's under the original copyright, which Jim owned, and he was the one who actually created it with Tantor, which was a media group that, you know, handled the distribution of it to Audible and all that other stuff. And he sent me a copy of it on CD with a little note saying, thanks for inspiring the creation of this. Just so you know. So Popeye, who was giving me this name, James Douglas, also supports it. I figured, you know what? I'm going to give James Douglas a call and see if that's true. So I called James Douglas, and guess what? Yeah, I said, look, Jim Fetzer is Jim Fetzer.
Have I made a mistake?
Yeah, Ed Haslam, I can't explain. But Jim Douglas, I happen to know, so let me go see if that's correct, because, you know, in all the conversations I ever had with Jim, he never really pointed to her having any sort of validity or anything, and we discussed Oswald in New Orleans, personally, just over the phone. And Jim, I think to this day, still only has a landline in his house somewhere down in the South. I don't even want to tell you where Jim lives because it's not information that he shares with everybody. Kind of an interesting guy, somebody who I don't necessarily agree with on everything, but wrote one of the seminal books in the case, JFK and the Unspeakable. It's an excellent book. You know, when it comes to literature, that thing is awesome compared to, you know, 99% of what's floating. Okay? So this was a guy, an author I have respect for, I decided to contact, and this is what happened. No, I never had that. She one time sent me a letter, and I, you know, said some kind words to her, and I think sent her a signed book back or something like that, but that was about it. So I went back and told him this, and of course, again, he just decided to go private on me and call me all kinds of names. And then immediately following, I was also called names by other Judyth supporters and picked on for my eyesight and given all kinds of crap. And some evidence of that still exists publicly on YouTube, which is funny because Glenn Vikland saw that when we were having a recent conversation and actually commented on it on Facebook and decided to show people, gee, isn't it strange? I feel bad for Chuck having to be left all alone to contend with Judy and her supporters. So that is actually how that exists, and there you go. That's my partial proof because, you know, YouTube no longer has that private email system set up anymore.
Well, if they want to check, they can also go to Facebook. Their insults and idiotic claims dot many pages.
Right. So, And hopefully I have a friend that possibly posted an ad for this show on the Down the Rabbit Hole Facebook page, and hopefully that happened, so that who knows?
We can reach out and touch someone.
Listen, we can, and by the way, if either Judyth or Popeye want to call in, the phone number is 718-717-8296. There is no screener. You will be added onto the air immediately.
Numbers,
Just no block numbers is the rule. Yes, that's true. No blocked numbers, and I will add you onto the air. So use one of those burner cell phones that you're using for your safety, Judy, and call me if you'd like. And I'll tell you what, I'll ask the rest of the panel to be quiet, and I will have a conversation with you where I might ask you a total of 5 questions. Okay? And you can defend yourself and do whatever it is you like. Open lines. Okay, so now that all that is out of the way, and I've run my mouth now, I don't want to run my mouth for this one, and I want to get Glenn on, because Glenn's stuff is superb. You know, and Glenn, by the way, let's make a statement here. Glenn is not exactly a guy who would agree with me on a lot of things.
No, we don't agree on a lot of things either, but he's reasonable and he's respectful.
Reasonable, respectful, and then when he had a curiosity about a question in his own home country of Sweden regarding her political asylum claims, he decided to check it out for himself, you know.
Yeah.
And, gee, interesting what he comes up with.
Facts didn't pan out, as usual.
Yeah, the facts don't exactly match the story, which seems to be a constant theme. And for more on that, I want to now turn it over to Zach and Trish. And let's see if that's a good enough segue to get to where they're going to go. And no more need to mention cartoon characters and people who don't actually do research, that just buy stories. Well, with the exception of Judyth herself. Okay. Because let's keep the focus where it belongs. Trish,
I do have some Popeye quotes. I'm just letting you know for later on.
Okay. If we get to them, we might need comic relief, because I'm telling you, trying to listen to, and I gave each of these people a link to a 5-hour interview with Judy, just to give them the total flavor in audio form, not to sit there and have to torturously read that Me and Lee book, but to actually listen to what it sounds like when she is given a friendly forum to speak.
Now you tell us, after 2 of us have already read it.
Yeah, well. And what it does is it's a perfect snapshot in 5 hours. That way you don't have to waste all the time. I mean, unless you can read her book in 5 hours, I mean, you know, I salute you if you can. But without having to go through that torture, if you just sit through this 5 hours, but that made each of our heads spin also. And I've heard all this before for sure. I don't know if these guys had, but I heard it all before, and I still had to keep stopping, walking away, and just going.
Clearing your head.
You know, because it does seem to be like an MK Ultra exercise. It's like psychic driving on acid, baby. Okay. Now, again, I'm sorry. I did say I was going to turn it over to Zach and Trish, and that's exactly what I want to do. So me and Carmine are going to mute, and the floor is both of yours.
Well, I think there's a lot that can be said just if you read her daily posts that she puts. I'll give you an example. On March 23rd of this year, she actually wrote a post on her own Facebook wall admitting that she lied over her dog Cindy versus Sparky in the Men Who Killed Kennedy documentary. And I thought that was just so unusual, such a petty thing to lie about and then actually admit it. You know, why? Why would she lie about something that insignificant? And again, it makes you wonder what else has been brought up. Another thing that's kind of really stuck in my mind is the time frame that she gives. There's a lot of controversy on where Oswald was staying between April 26th and the 29th. Some people say he was at the Moretz place, which by all accounts, looking at the testimony by the Moretz and such, it does appear that he showed up at that time once he got to New Orleans. Other things you read say he didn't move in until the 29th, which was the Monday, and that he was staying at the YMCA in New Orleans. One thing that really jumps out at me is Lillian Moret testifies that Lee was a creature of habit, would come home, he would eat dinner, and he'd stay in for the rest of the night. He went to bed early. But on 2 separate occasions, Judy's got him out staying at David Ferry's house all night. So one of them is on the 28th, which is a Sunday night. They had a big roaring party there, and of course Lewis was there and Martin was there. And Oswald apparently were playing chess all night. But again, depending on whose version you believe of when Oswald was actually at the Moret's, that is up for discrepancy there. And then she also has them going out on the 30th, which was a Tuesday night, which of course, worst case scenario, if he did move in on the 29th, it still contradicts what's in testimony. So that's always kind of stuck out to me that, how could she be that off with that information?
Yeah, that's something that's really important to consider, is that her book is so far off removed from, the recorded testimonies of actual people that were verified to be there. For instance, she goes on in her book, Me and Lee, about how Oswald was arrested because of a green glass that he stole for Judyth. But if you read Emmett Barbie's statement, he was the guy that worked with Oswald. He basically states, and others, including LeBlanc, who is also his boss, who gave testimony to the Warren Commission, said that he was let go because he was losing interest and wandering off on the job, and it had nothing to do with the green glass. It's just almost like these incidents are completely made up, and it's really kind of hard to understand where that stuff is coming from.
Well, and this is an interesting point to bring out. I'm just giving you guys a rest. I'm still going to turn it back over to you. But the thing is that over and over again, we do find that in the official explanation, although I personally disagree with the official conclusions, we do find that they did a rather bang-up job accounting for Oswald's whereabouts in certain timelines rather completely. There is no lack of interesting information tying him to certain people, places, and things that don't allow for her timeline to even exist regarding a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's also...
Well, that's right. That's right. I mean, go ahead, Carmine.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to quickly interject. It's also a problem with the commission later on. They wasted a lot of time finding Oswald in unimportant events, and they neglected things like, in the sniper's nest timeline.
Well, yeah, and these are all valid points. But what I'm saying is, when they were peripherally looking into his life...
They did a good job, yeah, definitely.
They did an excellent job tracking down, like certain records, placing him in different places, things like that. And that's despite the chicanery that that went on, in my estimation, regarding Hoover's investigation of the man. Yeah. There was all sorts of, if he wasn't on this bus going to Mexico City, then he must have been on this one. Stuff like that happens in the record, and I understand it. But what I was saying is, after a while, if you tie him down to the official record and even think that that's remotely reliable, there's a whole bunch of pieces of her story that can't possibly have happened unless we're talking about more than one individual. Mm-hmm. So... there you go.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't have two people you can't have one person in three places at once. It doesn't work. So there you go. That's a spot where, hate to give anything to the commission personally, but, credit where credit's due, like I always say. So go ahead, guys. What else do you see? Because, I know that going through that interview was a bit painful. And I only had you guys go through parts of it, each of you. But but what else?
Well, yeah, I told you, if you watch the whole thing, you buy her book at the end. It is like MK Ultra.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I likened it to psychic driving. That's what it's like, because after a while your head is spinning so much. Yeah. Go ahead, guys.
Well, one thing on the interview that I noticed is she does have quite a remarkable memory, and she was spouting off a lot of facts, rather quickly with a fair amount of detail. But then on the other hand, she spends a lot of time nitpicking, towards other researchers. I remember in the first hour she spent complaining about Max Holland for a good amount of the time, and I didn't quite understand what it was she was even trying to say. And I'm not trying to knock her and her speaking abilities, but it just sometimes comes at you in a roundabout fashion, and it's rather hard to understand what she's even trying to get across to people some of the times.
Another good example of that is when she's discussing David Ferry's repoed car. She says that he had a new car, then he had an old car, and then it was proven that it was repossessed, but then it was somebody else's car. And I still haven't got those lines straight. I've been reading that all afternoon today, and I still don't know exactly what her point is and whose car it was. But one thing that I was perfectly clear on was she stated that he had a motorcycle. However, she didn't put it in her book because she never wrote it. So, little food for thought there.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to see what else she didn't put in her book, and at various times during the interview, she states that there was a bunch of things that she couldn't put in her book because she would be afraid for her life. I find that counterintuitive because, after all, if you're somebody that is out there saying that, first of all, I was involved in a conspiracy to utilize medical testing on unsuspecting prisoners illegally and causing the death of other human beings, which has no statute of limitations. I also had foreknowledge of the plot to kill the president, which also has no statute of limitations, and all of these other wonderful things. What is it that you would be afraid to put in this book exactly that would get you killed, imprisoned, etc.? I wonder, because how much more extreme could you go than that? I mean, I was involved in the agency, I knew CIA people, I knew mafia people, but there are things I couldn't put in the book.
Well, it might have a little something to do with that most of those people are dead. And they can't contradict her claims.
That might be the case. So, anything else you guys want to add, Zach and Trish, before we move forward?
Well, I wanted to say something. I've been into some disputes with folks online about Judyth. I've spoken to her online a couple of times myself, and I've been accused of, and Trish also, and I'm sure all of us have in one way or another, accused of disliking her as a person, and it automatically comes to character assassinations. And I just wanted, if there's any time for me to put this on the record, that I don't have anything against Judyth as a person. And every time I've interacted with her, she's actually rather gracious to people that ask her questions. My main concern is that she has been, not able to substantiate her claims. And that, to me, I find it personally offensive that people, take this without a grain of salt and are trying to interject it into the historical record, and without giving it the amount of attention and gravity that it should deserve. And it's not that anybody has any personal problem with her. It's just that it's just that people need to be responsible when they're looking at these accounts, and if there isn't direct evidence, then perhaps we should take a step back and wonder why so many people are willing to accept this.
Well, right, and even though I believe that that just like much of her accounts, the whole accounts of her being threatened by others and being approached and having a conspiracy of now radicalized Muslims after her and God knows whatever else, all of these other things, although I believe it's all fictitious, I made this statement online that look, I in no way support the threatening or harming of anybody, no matter what it is they're saying out there. The problem I have is with, just as you do, her trying to interject herself into the historical record, trying to make claims that, that she was part of the historical record that has been since redacted, and things like this, because it's very misleading and I think is counterproductive to anybody who believes that this was a significant event in history, and that Oswald, because he is obviously a player in the event in one way or another, misdirection about him is no good, whether you want to make him the, the kooky malcontent, that was just absolutely insane, as some people do, or if you want to make him Mr. Innocent and clean. Either way, I think that honesty at this point, especially because the man is long since dead and has been convicted in the public's mind for so long, I think that some care ought to be taken to actually straighten out the historical record. So that's what my concern is.
Well, right, and as far as I'm concerned, big claims require big evidence.
Indeed. And substantial. Very substantial. You can't just step up and say that you know everything, because you're either deluded or you're a myth maker if you say that. No one knows everything. There are over 10 million files. We've got the Warren Commission. We've got the House Select Committee. We've got the Church Committee. We've got the Rockefeller Commission. We've got the ARRB. We've got all of the classified files that were hidden away until the 90s. No one has seen everything.
Right.
And if they say they have, they're lying to you.
Well, right, and but this is part of the presentation of the mythology, and why it's so attractive to the uninitiated, especially, is because she presents herself as the key to all of these interesting little claims, and all of these interesting little factoids that have emerged, in the research community over the years. She is actually the Rosetta Stone, according to her, and this is what the problem is. Now, this is what I believe about her story, and then I'll move on to Carmine, and then I'm really looking forward to moving on to Glenn Vikland, who has joined us on the conversation, by the way. How you doing tonight, Glenn?
Thank you, Chuck. I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm going to put you after Carmine, but I know that what you're going to say is going to spawn a lot of discussion. So we're... And
how's that? Am I that controversial, you mean?
Well, you may be, sir. You may be, but I'm telling you right now, a reasonable and intelligent man you are, though I may disagree with you on some issues. From what I can tell, I do and I also appreciate your characterization of me like being left all alone on the battlefield with with Judyth's minions. By the way, earlier today, I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, when I saw, I hadn't actually seen that before, but when I did see it yesterday, I was thinking, I should have been there when it happened.
Oh, I would have appreciated support there, because as you can see, it was just, let's go at him every which way, and we'll get into the post-Kennedy assassination claims and things like that. That's the section that you're coming in on, because of course, we'll get to that. I want to turn it over to Carmine after I give this little caveat about this situation. Here's what I think is the truth regarding Judyth and her real connection to the case. Ready? She may or may not have run into Oswald while working at the same facility in New Orleans. This seems likely, not absolute, but likely, that she could have. She could have realized afterwards that she had run into a person of historical significance, and like many other people throughout the years, we used to call it the brush with history genre of books in the Kennedy assassination literature. That used to be a private joke. But I think she literally did have a brush with Oswald at some point. Probably ignored him like most people did, because he was a rather odd guy. Anybody that I've ever spoken to who actually verifiably knew him describes a lot of interesting idiosyncrasies in this man's character and person. Okay? So, interesting guy, but a turnoff to a lot of people. I think that Judyth probably was turned off by him, probably had no time to bother with him, and whatever it was she was engaged in, despite the greater embellishments that have been produced by her in later years, I think that she actually did run into him. Anything after that becomes the embellishment, becomes the introduction and interjection of things which have been learned over the years, things which have been dispelled over the years, everything from Billy Celestes is an honest guy to, dear Lord, the abort team, okay, to the abort team, Oswald was going to make sure that at least one shot was not fired at Kennedy. And that was his purpose, and that's how he was trying to save Kennedy's life, is he was trying to turn the plot away. Well, that became, since I learned about Abraham Bolden later on, even though it was out in public hands from the 1970s on, that the possibility of the informant in Chicago being named Lee, now she says he tried to save Kennedy's life in Chicago, therefore he had knowledge of the Chicago plot, which is really interesting given the sort of networking capabilities of individuals in 1963. Yeah. But let's keep going with the unrealistic. I think that all of this stuff together, along with other mythologies that have been, sort of foisted upon those who were interested in the subject over the years, sort of came together in a conglomeration, and the evolution of her story was born. And of course, those that really paid attention to the literature know that there was an earlier version of her story that existed that didn't contain a whole lot of this information. But she blames the fact that that was vacant of so many of these interesting little factoids and things. She blames that on the publisher, the people handling the book, etc., the co-author, whatever. There is always someone else to blame in Judyth's case, as opposed to herself, regarding the evolution of her story and why it's changed over the years. But if you don't believe me, go ahead and get yourself a copy of one of those early books. Go ahead and get yourself some of the earlier statements. Things about Jack Ruby that are interesting, like during the portion of the interview I listened to where she bluntly says that Jack Ruby was a bisexual and things like that. And she knew that so well. And Jack Ruby characterized this way and that way. And of course, again, if you ever spoke to people that knew Ruby, you would never hear half of the characterizations that she brings up, just like in the case of David Ferrie, just like in the case of Lee Harvey Oswald. It's either an alternate universe, okay, a la Star Trek, or it's made up. That's my opinion. That's where I'll drop it. But yes, Zach.
I think it's important to interject in there also the appearance of Haslam's book, Mary Ferry and the Monkey Virus, in the mid-'90s. That seemed to maybe, sparked some sort of creative memories in Judyth's mind or whatever, but a lot of it seems to be based on, some of the topics he covered in that work.
Yeah, which was written completely vacant, again, completely void of Judyth's existence.
Until the second version.
Until the second version, which is now, called what, Dr. Mary's Monkey or something like this, right? I don't know, because I won't read the second version.
Yeah, no, I read one of her books. I'm done. Thank you.
Enough is enough. So now I'm going to turn it over to Carmine.
Okay, the first thing I'd like to say is we're going to quickly dispel a myth. Since you all heard Glenn Vikland, unlike Judyth and some of her supporters said, we are not the same person.
Oh, I was not aware that there was a controversy regarding Glenn Vikland and Carmine Savastano being the same person.
Yeah, that was early on. Now there's this genius named Helen that's dotting the JFK Venter group, trying to say that I don't exist, that I'm an amalgamation, apparently, of people.
Well, right, and I answered that directly, too. I answered that quite directly, and she, gave me an appreciative sort of polite response, and then continued to go on with her crap anyway.
That's why I think that she's Judyth.
I was just going to say, doesn't that sound like somebody else we witness online sometimes, where it's like, here's the proof that you're wrong. Oh, okay, I'm going to be quiet for a day, and then tomorrow I'm going to come back and say the same thing anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, Carmine.
Oh, it's okay. No, I just wanted to get that out of the way so I and Glenn don't have to deal with that one anymore.
Oh, yes. I can attest to the fact that we had to actually get Glenn to download Skype and everything late last night for us, but early morning for him, to get this working so that we could have him on the show. That actually happened last night when I was on the phone with Carmine at 3 or 4 in the morning, something like that. So, yeah.
Okay, so one down. Here we go.
Right.
Where to begin? Yeah, in my portion of the Baker cast, as I like to call it, I heard quite a few things that don't really add up. Some of the stranger ones include that she claims credit for discovering that Oswald was shaved all over his body, including his pubic area, completely after her death, is what she's stating. And she's stating that the CIA or the police did it. And it had something to do with covering up her allegations. How it does, I cannot fathom.
No, totally. See, and that's the other thing, is that quite often with her story, if you notice, a whole lot of interesting little tidbits are thrown out there with seemingly no purpose, that have no particular trail to anything else.
Exactly.
And it's just it's very much like the James H. Fetzer style of debate, where you throw 80 things at somebody, give them 2 minutes to respond, and you can't possibly cover all of these little tidbits of nonsense.
Yeah, just muddy the waters as much as possible.
Yeah, just here's all the mud, now clear it. It's not going to happen. And what did I do when you were discussing that with me? Is I showed you the post-mortem photographs of Oswald, and I said, okay, where?
Yeah.
But okay.
Exactly. Yeah, so she's wrong again, according to the evidence. She's just, this is just, it's created. There's no other way to say it.
Yeah.
Somebody created this. Maybe she didn't. Maybe somebody wrote it for her, but this didn't happen. And she's trying to blame the CIA for shaving his pubic area like it matters, like it's of some consequence, and it's not. And she wasn't even in contact with him in any of the days before the assassination. So how? What did he bring it up? By the way.
That is a weird question right there, is what relevance would his pubic hair have to her claims, considering the fact that she had left New Orleans months before, right? And wasn't in Dallas or in contact with him physically, although she claims to have been in contact with him by phone, which I still don't buy. But
let us see the phone records.
Yeah, well, they don't exist because they were utilizing an illegal, phone line that the mob utilized, So, which... If you actually know the nature of what it is she's making a reference to, you know how ludicrous that is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next, if I may.
Yeah, of course. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. No, you're going to have stuff to say about all this, and I welcome it. There's just so much. I want to try to cover it all.
Please, by all means. I don't want to run out of time.
Baker, what else did she say? She says that everyone who doesn't agree with her story usually tries to make up lies to discredit her. She claims to have all the proof needed, but never offers it. She declared the story is not for sale. However, her evolving books are. She asserts the book was only offered to one publisher, Trine Day and Chris Milligan, yet her prior claims on her blog refute that. If you go to her blog in her biography, she said, if any publisher showed interest in this incomplete story, which omitted some key names and activities, I'd then bring out the full 600 pages I'd written for protection from lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
So any publisher.
Yeah, well, can I just chip in there, Carmine?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what you're saying here is correct, of course. And this goes on a lot of subjects, lots of them, many, many subjects. She said one thing one day and then a completely different thing the next day. And this goes on. And I think the best way to check that and to see that are actually what David Reitzes has done, because he's really been very meticulous in showing how she said one thing at one point and then a completely different story, next time the same subject is up for discussion. So this is really, this goes in a lot of areas, basically.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I've always tried to tell people that the undoing of any myth is within its own claims. They always give us the rope to hang them with.
Yeah.
No,
keep
absolutely.
digging.
Right. Right.
I'd like to state that, Carmine, you said that she never presents the proof, but I flat out asked her, I said, where is your proof? And she said, quote, it's all in the book.
And we've read it. It's not.
Right.
Yes.
And that brings up another interesting point, is that anytime anyone questions her story, she claims that you merely haven't read the book.
Mm-hmm. And then if we have read the book, then the next claim is that you're a liar. If that doesn't work, you're CIA. If that doesn't work, you work for McAdams. If that doesn't work, just on and on with personal attacks without a stitch of evidence, ever.
That's
Yeah,
right. And her citations are terrible in that book, too.
Yeah, the pictures half the time.
Yeah, she was right. She was called out quite clearly on the citations, and she claimed that her editor at Trine Day wouldn't publish them because they felt like they weren't part of her story, and she was upset about this. But evidently, this was a publication decision, and they withheld her citations, and against her will. That's what she said.
Yeah, which I doubt. I truly do. No matter how I might feel about the various claims Mr. Milligan has made about me, I still doubt that his company would just rip out a bunch of citations, because those are kind of important to the verifiability of the book.
Well, not only that, but it leaves it perfectly wide open. I'm sorry, it leaves it perfectly wide open for her to publish said citations on her blog site as an addendum to her own book. She is fully capable and allowed to do so, as an author, and I'm sure she retained some of the copyright,
Chuck,
therefore. Go ahead.
Well, that's exactly right. Chuck, I asked her, I said, well, you obviously have these all prepared. Will you please present them to us? And she said, okay, I'll post them tomorrow. And then the next day she offered some excuse and didn't put them up.
It's the only history book I know of that gives a citation for Bullwinkle.
You're being nice. Let's not lie to anybody. History book.
Okay, it's the only alleged nonfiction historical record about people that gives a citation for Bullwinkle. Yeah, that I know.
Exactly.
I could be wrong, but
I think there's a problem.
Watch me, Rucky, while I pull some evidence out of my... All right. Anyway.
Okay, so where was I? Ah, yes, after the, there was that. And I'll try to, just because I know we have a... do you want me to wrap up with one more, or do you want me to do a couple more?
Oh, go ahead and do a couple.
Okay, yes. This is one of the funny Baker-Popeye exchanges. Baker says that she claims that in 1999 she spoke out about the Chicago plot, and that the informant was named Lee before Abraham Bolden did. But we know that's not true, because all of that was covered in the 60s and the 70s.
Well, it was covered in, I believe, 1975 in Edwin Black's article in the Chicago Independent, which you can still find online, which is exactly the source that was misquoted in Lamar Waldron's book, Ultimate Sacrifice, which is not on my suggested reading list, ladies and gentlemen, but either way, I tortured myself with it. The thing is that he has it incorrectly noted to a different author, but it's actually Edwin Black who wrote about it when he did an investigative reporting piece regarding the Chicago plot in 1975.
Now, to also debunk her claims about the Lee name, she demands the Chicago informant was called Lee, but how many informants could be called Lee? Because she said it has to be him. So what I did is I went to a census statistical analysis site, and there are currently 341,053 people named Lee, male and female, in the United States. So right off the top, it's very unlikely. Now let's add that Lee is likely a fake name because confidential informants don't use their real names.
Right. Generally either given a code name or a number.
Yeah,
more than likely a number or a cryptonym of some type, exactly. But even if it is a numeral and, if it's an alphanumeric combination, it's still, it's usually something that is not easily decodable, not easily traced back to a real person's identity. This is the way this is done. So the fact that the informant is allegedly named Lee, based on, the lie detector test, which was issued to Abraham Bolden in the 70s, who was the unnamed Secret Service informant in Edwin Black's article, which we learned about much, much later. But the fact is, that's where it actually came from. Okay, and look, you want to challenge the validity of Abraham Bolden's story, that's fine and dandy, but that becomes a separate issue. The fact is that this was something that had been bandied about for a long time and was even reissued to me sometime in the 90s through a research service called Prevailing Winds. Okay, so this was available.
And it's not the only time she does it. She's also in, on her blog, in James Fetzer's articles, said that Fetzer said many researchers have taken her information and used it and not credited her. And he includes Joan Mellon, which I find ridiculous.
Right.
Because Joan Mellon is a respected researcher who presents evidence. So I don't think that she or anyone else Judyth has ever claimed have used her research without proof has.
Well, presents evidence, not only that, but very carefully footnotes everything, creates attributions, makes sure when any publisher publishes anything, and she's been published by various publishers, okay, make sure that they're, even the footnotes are correct. Everything is correct in her book as best she can, and you give her a fair shot at being able to do that, considering that she's an English professor. This is why she is so meticulous about these kinds of things, because she sort of insists on these sort of standards from her students. Temple University professor Joan Mellon. And again, you want to dispute her work, fine, but think about the nature of that work, especially when we're talking about New Orleans, as was revealed on my show. If you talk about investigating the entire New Orleans aspect of the case, excuse me for misspeaking, she interviewed 1,200 people for her book on Garrison and the New Orleans aspect of the investigation. Tell me who else has done that.
And yeah, look at her results and see who isn't mentioned.
Well, and that's the funny thing, is in
Chuck,
all 1,200 interviews, guess whose name does not appear? Okay, go ahead, Zach.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to interject that I flat out asked her about this, and I asked her what type of research or what type of work are you doing? And she said, well, no, this isn't research, therefore it doesn't require footnotes. It's a personal memoir. So take that how you will.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, and
Go
I
ahead,
think
Glenn, please.
one of the reasons for this, Zachary, is that she's always said, I'm not a researcher, but I'm a witness, and she's been very sort of diligent about the difference. Of course, she want to be the witness, not the researcher, and I mean, it's not those of us who've seen her in action for a number of years.
Oh. Right. Not only that, but claiming to be
that's a very good point.
Yes, claiming also to be the only living witness that actually knew Lee Harvey Oswald aside from Marina. Well, all you have to do is listen to my radio show to know that that's bull, because who did I have on but Ernst Titovitz, who was Oswald's friend in Russia and kind of knew the guy. Okay, so there are, and there's actually a bunch of them. A lot of them don't want their names released, will not come out and speak publicly, won't do interviews, but if you very carefully and gingerly approach them, you can find individuals who actually knew Lee at various points in his life, although he only lived to be the age of 24. But she's,
and then there are those who say they knew him. And
that's true as well.
Yeah, and these people better be careful, They better write their life story down on paper, because when they die, she's going to include them in something.
Well, yeah, that's true, and she's already included, and I want to get to this because I know Carmine's probably going to cross over on this, because I think the portion of the interview that you listened to might have covered this as well. Her views on Marina Oswald. Was that?
No, she didn't really talk. If you want, we can go right to that. I'll finish up with just this last one. This, I think, is another, it shows exactly who we're dealing with. So it started out with, I have never seen this because I wasn't really looking for it, but have you guys seen a Masonic obelisk near Dealey Plaza or in Dealey Plaza?
I've heard about this claim before.
Okay.
There are certain structural. You know what that is? That is the aggregation of a belief in the King Kill 33 concept, which is all about Masonic ritual and things like that. And there are some interesting things that go on there that do pop up and seem as though it might have been. But it's one of those things where you're grasping at straws. And, of course, why not incorporate that into her consolidated myth?
Exactly. The master myth incorporating more peripheral conspiracy. So, Popeye claimed a local Masonic obelisk marker is a vengeful reminder of the widespread dark forces that he and Baker claim are responsible for JFK's death. Now, of course, then Baker, of course, parrots his unproven and highly improbable claim with an of course.
Mm-hmm.
She then launches into a diatribe about world government, big bankers, and other vague ideas, without any proof, of course. She claims that most symbolic organizations with such markers are signs of their dominance. And she says it's a large plot, yet each person described has one job, so no one can be blamed in her estimation. This is also unproven and improbable. So then Popeye ends with a mishmash of ideas and offers a listener that will take a picture of JVB's book next to Oswald's grave.
Oh, yes.
He will give them a free federaljack.com t-shirt, but it has to be a real picture of a copy of her book next to Oswald's grave. And what is her reply? Fantastic is her reply.
Of course.
Then he asks for them to send the photo for the t-shirt. The word shameless does not cover this bit of blasphemy. And I'm an atheist, and I'm saying blasphemy.
Well, even worse, of course, is the grave party that she...
Yeah, well, and she also said she collects these pictures. Well, isn't that nice?
Right. a loving tribute to how she loved, lost, and everything else. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah.
And there you have it.
and there you have it. And what that is, in all honesty, is an attempt to appeal to people like myself who do believe that there is a worldwide cabal of individuals that are mainly interconnected by corporate interests and that do have an agenda that is counterproductive to humanity in general. That is... It's a way to try and link herself to those that believe in the New World Order concept. So it is trying to get closer to the Alex Jones devotees, really, and people that swear that everything has to do with one singular worldwide cabal. Now, do I believe that there is a singular mindset here when it comes to those that are among the elite? Absolutely. I think that it's completely plausible based on the fact that there is an interconnectivity with all of these large corporate interests acting in concert with one another to do things that are poor for humanity in general. But all that is a way of pandering to people like myself who see broader conspiracies. Okay? That's all that is. It's not even that she believes this stuff. I mean, at one point in this whole thing, she's even talking about, how you can go to her for tips on how to deal with cancer because of the GMO foods. I'm telling you, every single thing that she can possibly pull from the conspiracy realm into herself, she is doing. This is what this is. And again, it's just pandering to those that want to hear this. And unfortunately, our friend named after the cartoon character, who I'd like to stop mentioning, is part of that. Okay, so she's pandering to him, his audience, and the residual people that might actually just pass across this allegedly groundbreaking piece of tripe that he is pushing. Okay, and by the way, why not interact with some grave pictures and let's have a party by somebody's headstone, because that's not morbid or strange or slightly disrespectful to somebody's memory or anything. Let's literally dance and party on somebody's grave that we loved so much.
Exactly. I don't think any of us talking now or anyone listening has ever gone to a grave and thought, hey, let's get streamers and balloons.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's take a head count. Glenn, have you ever decided to go to someone's grave and throw like a cake and ice cream party or what?
I can't say I have, no.
Zach and Trish, maybe you have. Have you guys ever done that?
No, and I certainly haven't asked for donations for $300 worth of balloons and a cake.
Oh yeah, the donations too. Let's not forget. Oh, we have a phone call. Shall we take it?
Yeah.
I'm ready if you are.
All right, let's do this. Okay, phone caller, you are on the air.
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hey, I just called because I was wondering about Jim Mars. Jim Mars believes Judy Baker's story. And, Jim Mars is the one that woke me up after the JFK movie, and the whole Crossfire book. And I was just wondering why Jim Mars and, guys like Jesse Ventura, believe Judy Barry Baker's story. I'm just curious what you guys think.
Well, I've got a lot to say about that, but would anybody else like to take a crack at it first?
I'm more than happy to let you go.
I
Chuck.
know that I've often wondered that question myself.
Well, what do you think, Carmine?
Okay, well, here I go making enemies again. Would you
I
like
don't
my
mean to
honest opinion?
Well, I mean, I'm just a guy I'm a researcher, and
Well,
and
honestly,
I don't believe Judy Barry Baker's story, but I really believe, Jim Mars and Jesse Ventura, to a point,
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think that's a very reasonable position to take. A grain of salt with everybody, no matter who it is. I've said before, whether it's me or Judyth or anyone that's written a book, go to the sources and go to the primary evidence, and that'll show you who's accurate or not. And
Right.
my problem with people that support her, like Mars and Jesse Ventura, is, to me, it is more likely a press and money issue than it is they actually believe her issue. And the longer it seems that some people are involved in the conspiracy realm, the more things they start to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll give you my point of view on this, okay? All you have to do is understand that, yes, Jim Mars makes some interesting points in some of his presentations, some very valid points, but unfortunately, a lot of the other stuff that the guy pushes is, again, pandering to the conspiracy sort of genre of media at this point. It's a matter of, let me say the most crap and put out the most, stuff so that I'll appeal to the wider audience. Jim Mars has been a master at that for many years, and unfortunately he's sort of been deified among people that do believe, honestly and legitimately, that there is a clear conspiracy here. Unfortunately, you don't have to look very much further than to say, take a look at his explanation about the silver certificates and, the executive order number 11110. This is one of the earliest guys really pushing that whole thing in print. But if you read the executive order for yourself and understand it based on what was released and what actually happened, and the fact that I proved myself on YouTube by pulling out of the money supply older notes that were still in circulation that were dated long before Kennedy's time, that this was not a significant mechanism for Kennedy to have done anything. If you put these things together and take a look at a guy like G. Edward Griffin, guess what? You have an explanation that, with very little research, tells you that a lot of the things that Mars pushes falls apart very easily. But he appeals to everything from those who believe in the alien agendas to the New World Order to so on and so forth. And I'm not saying that I necessarily disbelieve in all of that, but poor evidence is poor evidence regardless of what it's supporting. And Mars, in my estimation, is not a guy that you can go to for primary sourcing. He makes a lot of interesting points, and he does make some good points. Ventura, same thing. The fact that the Kennedy assassination, is likely a conspiracy, and there were many documents that were withheld, and all of these things, he's dead on right. But all you got to do is take a look at that god-awful conspiracy theory episode he did, where he pushes up, the nonsense of Howard Hunt. I forget the guy who wrote Family of Secrets, but I mean, the poorly sourced end of his book, which tries to involve George H.W. Bush in the plot.
That was Russ Baker, I believe.
Russ Baker, thank you, Glenn. That's exactly. And his stuff, again, he did a bang-up job when it came to unmasking George W. Bush in that book, Family of Secrets, but a god-awful job, all sort of mistakes regarding H.W. and just literal historical facts. As for where H.W. was, as for who he was at particular times, as for what he was involved in, everything. You know what I mean? And you put that together with, like I said, E. Howard Hunt and some guy who allegedly gives him documents on a bridge somewhere, which is clearly a fictional thing that, is meant to represent something else. I mean, Ventura did an awful job with the Kennedy assassination, and though he may know a lot about certain things, like maybe being the governor of Minnesota for a short time, and he may know a lot about being a professional wrestler and how Hollywood doesn't represent itself properly to the people and things like that, he doesn't know jack about the Kennedy assassination. That's what it really comes down to, because he's never really studied the primary evidence. And even regarding primary stuff, I mean, look at who he utilizes as a co-author, Dick Russell. And Dick Russell, you can argue with his stuff or not, but Dick Russell, at the very least, attempted to get primary evidence, attempted to conduct interviews of real people that may have been involved, actually talk to, witnesses in reality, things like that, stuff that Ventura never did, despite his position as a media guy who is accepted by unfortunately, the conspiracy-minded audience. And that's really what I've got to say about all that. And I don't know if anybody disagrees with me, but that's where I stand on it.
Well, Chuck, I'd like to note that this seems to be kind of a pattern with people who support Judyth. Even if you look at Jim Fetzer, some of his work back in the day, like in the 90s and stuff like that, that isn't even necessarily Kennedy-related, but as critical thinking type of work that he did. He was actually an award-winning professor, studying analysis and people's thinking, critical thinking, and all of a sudden he's supporting all these, I'm not going to say crazy, but just any conspiracy theory that comes down the canal, he's jumping on board pretty much. It boggles my mind. The caller mentioned Jim Mars. It seems to be the same way. Jim Crossfire is one of the most well-respected books in the community, I think, and all of a sudden now you see Jim Mars writing about UFOs and mind control. It's how does this happen? How did they leap from respectability to, this conspiracy theory,
Potpourri, yeah. 805 area code, you're on the air.
Hey, guys, this is Steve Rowe. How you doing?
Hey, Steve Rowe. Nice to hear you.
Hello.
I tricked you. I didn't call my block number.
So that means that we actually have two individuals on the air who are not exactly on my side regarding the fact that there is a conspiracy that
indeed a fair panel.
John F. Kennedy. Carmine, I think we need to let Steve and Glenn both speak now.
Oh, feel free.
Yeah.
Well, no. I'll be honest with you. We can take that one up later, but good conversation with Judy baby there, and I'd like to hear more of Glenn there if I could regarding his Swedish study on that, and he's got a lot of great info, and he's been in there for a long, long time.
Oh, absolutely. I was saving what I feel is the best for last, actually, because I looked at Glenn's stuff, and I love what he did. So, and again, this is not a guy, I mean, let's just be very clear about this. Both Glenn and Steve, but you guys basically believe that Oswald acted alone?
Well, I don't consider Oswald innocent. No, that's correct. But, if there was more to it, well, I haven't studied enough, to be honest, to conclude that. But I don't regard Oswald innocent, no.
Okay, Oswald is not innocent. Steve, though, you believe that basically Oswald acted alone, or are you kind of the same mindset that Glenn is?
Well, Chuck, I believe he took the shots. He did it. He did that alone. But there's a lot more to that story to be told. But he was up on that rifle on the sixth floor pulling that trigger. No doubt in my mind.
Okay, so I just wanted to make it very clear to the listener that I've got two guys on that don't necessarily agree with me. I feel as though, just to clarify my position, that although this is not an innocent guy, I don't think that he is the assassin. I simply don't after a study of the evidence, but this is not the issue today, is it?
Can I add one thing quickly?
Go right ahead, Carmine.
And I want to say that to everyone listening, and we're going to be respectful to each other, and that's what we're hoping will spread to the rest of the community, that just because we don't agree on things doesn't mean we need to attack each other, that we can discuss things and may get greater enlightenment through discussion.
I very much agree to that, Carmine. Absolutely.
Right. Exactly the point here. So, Glenn, with Steve's prodding, yeah, I think it is time we get to you. And the reason is, of course, that the ever after with Judyth is that everybody is after her. She had to go to Greece and then Hungary, and then she went to Sweden seeking political asylum because she was so much in danger to come to the United States until it was time to do her book tours. But she had to avoid coming to the United States and sought political asylum in Sweden. And according to her blogs and things like that, she was granted political asylum in Sweden because her life was in danger. I think you could probably pick up the story from there.
Yeah, that's right. That's what she had been saying for quite some time, as I understand it. You know, it was by coincidence actually that I've been following sort of from a distance quite a few of the JFK forums at the time. This was back in 2008, and all of a sudden, someone in McAdams forum, the AAJ, said that she had been granted asylum in Sweden. And, you know, I found this very peculiar because, as I'm sure you guys get political asylum in another Western country. Now, a little bit simplified, you can say that there are basically two reasons to get asylum. Either you come from a war zone, basically, so, or where there's been, you know, like an earthquake or something like that. Or the other situation would be that that your country, where you're a citizen, can't protect you for some reason. You know, either that you threaten the state somehow, or, well, you know, something along these lines. And I mean, to prove any of this is very difficult.
Well, right. You would have to be a political dissident of some type, or to prove that it would be too hostile for your own well-being to remain in the country of your origin. Things
That's
like
right.
this. And it is especially difficult, and I want to make sure we make this extremely clear, that to go to another Western-type country and seek political asylum is much more difficult than to, say, come from the Middle East and seek political asylum.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and you have to bring proof, you know, when making this. You petition a court, you know, and this applies across the planet, although every single country has its own sort of system by which they do this. Now, why would this be of particular interest to you is because, why, Glenn?
Well, you know, I've been following the JFK assassination ever since I was a child, basically. And, you know, I do remember very clearly, I was 9 years old when it happened, and my mother had a very, very strange look on her face, and she told me that the American president had been killed. And this was not like her at all. So that made an impression on me. And, you know, I did figure out, even though I was very young at the time, that what's this, you know, and why is my mother reacting this way? And so that's basically where my interest started. And you know, like 10, 11 years later, I was an exchange student living in California, and this was in the mid-'70s. And it happened to be the time when Geraldo showed that the Zapruder film for the first time. And that really ignited the debate. So when I was an exchange student in California, you know, I followed this and all these claims of starting a new investigation and all of that. And eventually we got the HSCA, of course. So I have a long interest in the assassination, and you know, I've been fascinated like many others. And to start with, of course, I was also convinced, you know, that this got to have been a conspiracy. So that's where I started a long time ago. And these forums, after the internet came and all that, you know, I started to following the debate more closely, and that's why I sort of noticed this, that she was supposed to be in Sweden, and and like I said, I could not believe that. You know, had she really proven that that she had the correct reasons to be granted asylum? I found that very peculiar. So I decided to have a look at this, and it took me about, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks, 3 weeks perhaps, you know, to do the research and to get the court decisions, and to talk to a few officials about it, and also to learn the fine print, of course, about the asylum procedure. And once I'd done that, I decided to forward these decisions to John McAdams, because I told him, you know, I followed the debate in your forum, and these guys are wrong in so much that they're saying. So I think this would take away a lot of the uncertainties and give them some knowledge about this. And I can tell you that she has not been granted asylum in Sweden. In fact, she's been denied twice, and that's the bottom line. And that's where it started.
Right, and the court decisions that you got your hands on, I mean, what did they say as to why she was denied her political asylum? Because she was under threat from her own government, allegedly. What did it say about that procedure?
Well, basically it said that, you know, she told them that she had evidence of harassment, of threats, and a lot of things. And she never provided anything, and they stated this. Mm-hmm. But, you know, when you read between the lines, you can also, I mean, beyond the dry sort of judicial lingo, you can see that these guys didn't believe her. It's as simple as that, you know. That's my interpretation, and I've spoken to a lot of friends. I've got a couple of friends who are far more knowledgeable in judicial stuff than I am, and, you know, they say the same things, basically.
Right. So what it is...
Glenn, I have a question for you. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah,
Glenn, I was wondering, you know, in your... Okay, I was wondering if in your perusal of the documents relating to her asylum claims, did they at all get into whether they believed her story of Lee Oswald or not?
No, not specifically, I'd say. You know, they're looking at her reasons to be granted asylum, if she sort of fulfills those requirements. And so there was no extensive discussion about Lee Oswald, no. They're looking, you know, hardcore, does she have the reason to be granted asylum or not? And that's what they discussed. But it was not, even though I'd say, you know, these decisions were perfectly all right. You know, they were perfectly, they motivated their findings and all that. But they didn't specify anything about Lee Oswald, I'd say. But they did, of course, her deposition to them is in those decisions, as you might have seen if you've downloaded the document that I provided on the Facebook site. Mm-hmm. So you can see that there. Both of these, both the migration board, which is the lower instance, and then the migration court, which is where you do your appeals, said basically the same thing about this.
Yeah, basically, to put it in a nutshell, what they found is that her claims had no basis. She presented no evidence, which vaguely sounds familiar because it sounds very much like the way we were just describing her book. A lot of claims without any evidence to support it. Isn't that fascinating that pattern prevails all the way into 2007 and 8? Yeah.
This is true, and she wanted, actually, she petitioned to get a verbal hearing, but they flatly denied it. So, And that tells me, and I've discussed that with a couple of friends of mine, and they agree. They did not believe her story. There were too many holes in it. She had no evidence, no witnesses, and that's why they denied this. And there was nothing that pointed to her not being able to return to the United States, for instance. Nothing that she had proven to them, or even slightly proven, in any way indicated.
Right. So the continuous story about not being able to appear in public or to be able to take interviews or discuss things with people or directly interface with people based on the fact that she is under a constant threat and therefore is, requires a whole lot of security and things in order to be able to do stuff because they really want her dead because she has the great truth to unveil to the public. All of these things, when challenged in a court to seek a political asylum in another country, turn up with just about the same amount of evidence regarding her alleged relationship with Oswald, her alleged relationship with the CIA, and all of these other interesting characters. No evidence, lots of claims, but no evidence to verify it, to bolster said claims in any way, shape, or form. That's what comes up, and that's what I take away from it, Glenn.
Yeah, and you're correct. That's a good description, actually. Yeah. And not only that, basically, but what she said is more interesting, because this was at McAdams' site, but a year and a half later, in the spring of 2010, there was this infamous exile thread. And that's where she said, that she had been escorted to Sweden by Swedish agents from Hungary when she first arrived in Sweden for her protection. Now, I discussed this with a couple of officials. And they, if I remember correctly, that's when one of them specifically asked me, "What's wrong with this woman?"
I'm sorry to laugh. It's just that. Do you know how many times that question has come up to people that discuss her with me privately? Effectively, they where they say what's wrong, and I say always I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't tell you, but the thing is, it does beg the question, right? To make a spectacle of yourself, to make all these claims where you have no sort of evidence in order to bolster them, to back them in any way, shape, or form, to essentially say that my story is my story and therefore needs to be believed on the basis of it itself. Well, what does that sound like to any discerning listener?
Faith.
Yeah. No, and I can tell you that time back in 2010 at the Education Forum, that's the only time when she's actually sort of answered a few questions that I had in a somewhat polite way. That's the only time. Since then, she's only discredited me and lied. She's one lie after another. There's always a new one. She's posting this stuff on her own Facebook sites, and there are lots of lies. She's now telling them that I've been following her, that I've been visiting at that migration center where she lived and all that, and talked to her handlers. Live, which did not happen. I did all the research from my home, from my computer, and through the phone, and that was it. And so she wants the discussion to be about me as a researcher, not about her and her lies.
Well, because what do you do when you're losing in a debate is to turn against the individual you're debating so that you don't have to deal with the actual subject matter. This is a typical kind of way of doing a dishonest debate, isn't it? This is exactly what happens.
I'm far from the only one. I was thinking what Zachary said when about an hour ago, which was very kind words to her. But my thoughts when you said that, Zachary, was that you just wait. If you continue to sort of insist on your position versus her, you will find out, the nasty version of Judyth Baker.
Oh, they have. Yeah, that was just early on.
Oh yeah, we've gotten it. I just like to give her I was just trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Really, I just wanted to be clear that there's no hard feelings. At least, that's not our point.
This isn't a personal attack. It's a professional attack. We're criticizing her professional stance on this topic.
Yeah. And that's fine. That's excellent. I do respect that. And I tried that for a long time to no avail. She was attacking, and lying.
Until now.
Yeah, well, that comes to, well, I decided actually before all this turbulence back in January, February, when you guys did all the research and presented it and all that. Before then, I decided, enough is enough. Now I'm going to go after her. I've had enough of this. Friends of mine here in Sweden, told me what they'd read on the internet, and I checked it up, and it was correct. She goes on lying about me on the internet, and I warned her, you got to stop this stuff, because now I'm going to follow through. And we'll see what happens. But I won't take that no longer. She can't do this.
I don't want her people to mischaracterize what you're saying. And in my opinion, I don't think any of us, it can be called an attack, but it's a debunking is what's going on here. We're not attacking any person. We're attacking anyone that tries to make up myths and interject it into history, because they're wasting our time. They're wasting everyone's time, and they're making false leads that are going to put people off for years. Maybe that's why we haven't solved the case yet, because there's so many people like her putting out false leads.
Yeah, well, but she's one of a kind. And I think what she's doing is so outlandish that it's beyond comprehension. People can. I remember, after that first encounter on the AAJ site in December of 2008, I do remember when I participated basically for a month or so, and then I quit. I had enough of these guys. There were 2 or 3 of them that were attacking me quite viciously, actually. And so I had enough. But when I sat down and thought about this, I would have expected them to appreciate the fact that I'd gotten documents that told them what the facts were. But, her supporters did not appreciate that. They attacked me.
Right.
And I need to point out that Morton Shackelford was the exception, but there were a couple of others. They attacked me pretty viciously. And when I sat down and thought about it, I couldn't believe this, because all I did really was to provide documentation. Now, how can they want to be this vicious because of this? Right. And yet, at that point in time, back in December of 2008, that was nothing as compared to what was coming, in 2010, in March and April, when Judyth herself was there. Now, that's when the real fun began, Oh my God! I was a spy. I was an asset, and blah blah blah. All that, And she tried constantly to get the discussion to be about me instead of her.
Well, right.
Hey, Chuck.
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, I just want to say something real quick.
Please.
What Glenn's telling you is absolutely true. I mean, he's been battling this a long time before you guys jumped in. And he's got a lot of experience with Barbara, Jay, and everybody there. And that's why I just kind of want to prod it along and get it up there, because what Glenn says is absolutely true. And I'll just shut up and listen, okay?
Well, no, Steve, I appreciate that, but I'm telling you now that I was trying to tell people in the early part of this century, okay, like in 02, in 03, that this was going to be a problem. Okay, I told them that, and they did not take it seriously. And I mean conspiracy authors whose names you would know, Steve, that I sat down with and said, guys, you need to address this because you have the gravitas to nip this in the bud now. If you don't, it's going to grow because this nonsense is going to sound attractive. Okay, and nobody would take me seriously. I mean, I have a lot of emails and stuff saved, and I don't disseminate my emails, but one day I just might, to show that I was trying to tell all kinds of people who thought that it wasn't even worthy of response because it was so, so fictitious and ridiculous that, listen, I'm not going to take my time to respond to that crap. I mean, it took me I think 3 or 4 years to convince Walt Brown to co-write that article with me that we put in JFK Deep Politics Quarterly. okay, which was titled, by the way, Judy Baker, fraud or fiction. All right. It took me 3 or 4 years to convince him to do that. Okay. But before that, I was complaining about this, and I said, this is counterproductive to us. No. We need to just continuously hammer.
That's good to know, Chuck. That's good to know. I'm sorry, Glenn. That's good to know, and Chuck, and I applaud that. And
I think it's
and I applaud everybody
counterproductive.
here tonight.
Period.
But go ahead, Glenn.
No, I think what she's doing is counterproductive no matter what side of this issue you happen to be on. She wants to write herself into U.S. history, and in my opinion, she has no place there.
No, she doesn't. You're totally correct.
Very good.
The whole problem is precisely that. If she, I've told people before, she could have been the J.K. Rowling of historical fiction. If she would have done all this and just put fiction on her book instead of nonfiction. She could be rich. Rich and famous and well beyond all of us. But instead...
that'd be a Harlequin.
I need to say another thing here. One person that of late has written quite a lot of good stuff. That's Pamela Brown. Pamela Brown used to be a quite ardent supporter of Judyth Baker for a long time, for 7 years, at least 7 years. And she took a lot of beating because of that from a lot of researchers around. And of course, as you may know, she is now an enemy of Baker. Now,
the myth.
Yeah. So has Baker said. I mean, she's appointed her an enemy. And but what and I think she is basically spot on. You should go to her blog, Finding Judyth. It's a very good blog, and she has some really interesting thoughts there about Judyth, and she is an insider, sort of, anyway. And what she says is that, everything now is about Judyth. This is not about JFK or Lee Oswald or anybody. This is about Judyth Baker. She's trying to make, and if you look at her from a distance, if you look at what she's doing now, being in 70 Facebook groups and all that, everything is about her. She's so controlling. She wants to control everything. She's banning people who doesn't believe her. She's censoring those who doesn't listen to her. And all of this behavior, points exactly in the direction that Pamela has written quite a lot about. And I think she's correct about this,
I'd like to add that also people can go to the Lone Gunman podcast with Rob Clark, the Punching Judy episode, which is a play on Punch and Judy, the old play.
Yeah, the TV show and all that stuff, the old presentation, exactly, and I highly recommend it as well. Rob Clark is a good guy who would have joined us if he could have tonight. Yes, absolutely, the Lone Gunman, and that name threw me at first because I thought he was just going to talk about how Oswald did it, but, he explained that to me, and of course he's been our guest on this show before. But definitely I recommend him as well. So.
Hey, Chuck?
Yeah.
Let me just say one little last statement here, and I applaud everybody here. I think we're all in agreement here, right?
Yep.
She's a fraud, and I just wanted to get Glenn's story in there real quick. And I'm sorry for interrupting there, but my hat's off to you, Chuck, and your efforts, and Zach and Trish. Those are great people.
See, remember this, Steve. Yeah. I'm interested in the facts, the reality. I believe that it has been hidden from us, but it has not only been hidden, I believe, by the government, but even more so, it has been diluted and absolutely dirtied up by all of this poorly founded nonsense, which has been spread on my side of the fence. And that's why I'm attacking that stuff. Because people keep complaining to me, why aren't you attacking the Warren Commission in your mythology show? Well, here's the problem. You may disagree with the Warren Commission's conclusions. You may disagree with their methodology in certain places, and that is all right for debate. But it is not wholesale fiction being created and then distributed to the public as if it were the alternate reality that you should be looking at. So there you go. We can have an honest debate. about the historical record. We can have a debate about the methodologies. We can have a debate about these things, but we're going to have to come correct with the science, with the actual documentation, with the discussion of the individuals involved, what their agendas really were, things like that. But when it comes to a story like hers and many others that have been launched out there into the universe of JFK mythology, okay, it is mostly a bunch of hearsay and nonsense that causes people to go down the wrong trail. I would much sooner believe that Oswald alone did this than I would believe any of the universe of stuff that she has put out. Okay?
Chuck, may I say something?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that at all. And I think that her battle was with the lone numbers before all this. Mm-hmm. But these people here today are carrying the torch, and they're doing a great job, like yourself, Chuck, Zach and Trish and Carmine, Glenn, and everybody's carrying the torch. And exactly right. So we just got to move forward here and expose this fraud. But anyway, you can. I lost my train of thought here, but anyway, you can carry on with this conversation till 50 years from now, actually, Chuck, because her supporters will always believe the story.
Oh yeah.
And everybody agree with that?
Oh, definitely.
So,
well, yeah, we're only going to be able to convince reasonable people.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Unfortunately,
that's the reality of it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think you're probably correct about that, Steve.
And it is a shame. I really wish they would listen to opposing viewpoints. I see, a lot of people think that if you ever argue with them, it's a bad thing. It's not. It's a good thing, because no one's going to know everything, and hearing an opposing viewpoint might actually make you think about something you wouldn't have thought of in the first place.
Mm.
Well, let's just get this straight right off the bat, okay? There's lone nutters that battled her way before, and Chuck did it for his credit. But this not a lone nutter or a conspiracy thing.
Yeah,
this is a false fucking story.
And there it went.
I just boil it down to simple old country facts, right? I'll shut up and go ahead there, Chuck.
That was great.
No, that's fine, brother. Believe me, and again, I am interested in the historical reality. The old adage about letting the chips fall where they may, and other people have utilized that for book titles and things like that. I'm telling you right now, that's what I want to see, but I want the real chips to fall, not the bull chips. Looks like we got another caller. What are you? 617 area code. You are now on the air.
It's the Hitman, guys.
Hey, Matt, what's going on, man?
How y'all doing?
Man, easy.
I haven't
got a good one coming out too.
I have to admit, I haven't heard the show tonight because I've been with a family obligation, but I was just calling in to see how things are going.
Pretty good. It's Glenn's here, Steve's here, Zach's here, Chuck's here, I'm here, Trish is here, everybody's here.
Yeah, Steve Rowe, Glenn Vikland, Carmine Savastano, Trish Fleming, Zachary Gendro, and myself all on the line. Hitman, what do you think of that?
I'm just honored to be able to talk to you all. Tremendous people who care about using actual primary sources to really search for the truth, and I think that's what's challenging right now. Is there's people weaving stories out there that are half truths with just enough truth that the average person who doesn't dig deep enough is going to buy into.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Hey,
Hi, Matthew.
Hitman.
You did a great job on your article, Matthew.
Another great job, Matt.
Hey, Chuck.
Yeah, we want to congratulate you.
Thank you. I'm that one I've been sitting on for a while, but it felt good to get it out there finally.
Yeah, well done.
It exposed the hell out of it, man.
Well, yeah.
Well,
no,
again, that's digging deep. That's looking at multiple sources, and it doesn't add up. The story that's being woven does not add up to what the primary sources demonstrate.
Matthew, I think what you should expect now is a couple of days, 2 or 3 days of silence from Judyth Baker, and after that you will see a mega rant on one of her sites about what you have written.
That's what happened with the Thornley. That's what happened with my Thornley article. It was quiet for a few days, and then all of a sudden, boom.
Standard operating procedure.
You know, the nice part about the Thornley article was Thornley is an interesting character that has a biographer who was willing to come out and take a stand. The thing with the Eric Rogers article that I put out today, Eric Rogers is not somebody who's going to have a biographer. So this is it's really challenging when you've got people who are dead and gone. I'm actually right now. I started it today. I'm looking through Ancestry.com to see if I can track down any Eric Rogers relatives to see if they would weigh in on this. But I think a few of my friends that are on the radio right now know I've done that before. Used Ancestry.com to try and help chase down some leads. So it's always fun, but the real world sometimes gets in the way of my ability to really chase down things. So that's the way it goes.
Absolutely. One other person on the line that I did not mention is Dylan Wade. Dylan, how are you doing tonight? Are you listening to all this, and what do you think?
Yeah, I'm listening, and really funny, actually.
Well, and you were somebody who was among the uninitiated regarding the JFK case. You had sort of just a cursory knowledge based on things you had sought on the internet, etc., right? And you were introduced to the Judyth Vary Baker story. What are your thoughts at this point in time concerning Judyth and all the stuff that we're saying? I mean, are we just terrible people that don't want to believe this poor old woman, or what?
Well, the only experience I've really had with them, or with her, is through her supporters.
That's usually the case.
And they're nuts.
There you go.
That didn't take very long, did it, Dylan?
I'd also like to remind the audience that Dylan is 16, so some of her supporters have some catching up to do.
Yes. There you go.
I barely questioned their story, and they already started attacking me.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
You're in good company.
Just for knowing you guys.
We could actually start a club of people who have been attacked by Judyth Vary Baker's supporters.
Did you mention my name to them, Dylan? Did you ever mention my name?
No.
Oh.
You were on with them with me, remember?
Oh, you mean those people that run that station?
Yeah, those guys. They went after me bad when they interrupted my show to do an ad for her.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. He was doing a radio show, and they did an ad. There are more ads on their radio station for her than there are for them, and it's pretty funny. They heard me, which is kind of hysterical because they had no idea who I was. They heard me, going through different aspects of the case, realized that I was somebody who was valuable in that way, and wanted to somehow interject the Judyth Vary Baker thing into it. And what happened? I dropped off of your show.
Well, I did shortly after because they took over.
Yes, that's the reaction. He's shut down, somebody who might actually be knowledgeable on the case, things like that. Yes. Anyway.
Hey, Chuck.
Just another Saturday night.
Yes, no, just another Saturday night. Believe this or not, we're down to the last 20 minutes. Steve, you wanted to say something?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I would like to let the Hitman talk a little bit about his recent article.
You know what? So would I. I wanted to get, because you mentioned it, I wanted you to give everybody the name of the article, where they can find it, and kind of a quick explanation of sort of what it's about as a teaser, if you could, Hitman. That would be great.
Basically, what I started doing is I started a few months ago looking chapter by chapter at the book Me and Lee and looking to see if the historical primary sources backed up what was being said. And in the midst of my Thornley work, Judyth on one of the Facebook groups started posting about Eric Rogers, which is indeed in her book. But she posted, as I cited in my article today, basically her to summarize it, she's saying that Eric Rogers was a front person for Lee, that Lee was paying Lee for the rent for 4907 Magazine Street, and he used him so that he could do his leaflet distribution and protect his family. And what I found in my research is that Lee had no need for an Eric Rogers. He had leaflets stamped with the correct address. He had leaflets stamped with 4905. He had leaflets stamped with 4907. He had begun his leaflet distribution a month prior to Eric Rogers arriving. He was using the name Alec Heidel on some of them. So they're really, and then the best part was the post office boxes. He had the wrong post office box on the leaflet. So there was really no way to trace it to the place where he was residing. He had no need for Eric Rogers. And when you look at the amount of evidence, it just doesn't support, that this man Eric Rogers was anything other than a man collecting a pension, renting an apartment that happened to be used by Lee. He used the mailbox originally because nobody resided there. And when you look at 49, that whole complex of Magazine Street, it's really interesting. There was one FBI report that I found that indicated there was a fourth apartment that used the address 4905. So it may very well have been very logical that Lee didn't want any mail going to 4905 because the mailbox was shared. So that's it. It's even down to her claims of the power. The best part was she claimed that the power was on and that she had defrosted the refrigerator, the freezer.
Do you know what the root of that problem is? Why she has to give all these wild explanations to that? It's because she made a claim about a particular part of her timeline some years ago relating to Lee utilizing this other apartment as a fictitious address to avoid mail getting in the hands of Marina. Okay? Now, when she said that, the problem was that somebody decided to go and get themselves records of the the utility bills. And because it did not comport with her explanation, okay, she has now had to create this whole sub-universe of explanations for what went on there. Because it didn't work with her story when somebody actually checked, documentation.
Right. And it still doesn't work.
and still, her new explanation is still no good. That's the funny part here.
No, but that's what she's doing all the time. She's caught with one lie, and she never backs down. Instead, she goes the other way. There comes another lie, and a third one, and a fourth one, to the ridiculous. And Matthew, when I read your paper this afternoon, and very good, solid research there. And what struck me again was that she's using actual details like the street numbers and the apartment and all that, and she's twisting the facts with existing things, basically things that are verifiably there that you can check, and those are there. But she's twisting them, so that you have to dig deep to find this. And one thing, right. I'm just going to mention a little detail. Well, she said, and she's still saying sometimes, that when she first came to Sweden, she was granted asylum for 10 months, and I don't think she's using the word granted, but she's now calling it, being in the asylum system. And what she did a long time ago, I believe that the first time was on the Education Forum, she provided a picture of herself on an ID card. And she said, Well, I came to Sweden and I was drawn to this island for 10 months. And look at this ID card. You can see when it's issued. And, and normally you don't get 10 months. And but when I checked this up, it turns out that those ID cards are issued only for a duration of 3, 4, or 6 months. So what happened in reality was that she was issued one, probably for 3 months. And then during that time, she got a negative decision, and then she appealed. And then she got a second one. So what she was showing on that picture was 1 out of 2. But she's not telling anybody because she wants it to look more sort of trustworthy in conjuncture with what she said previously.
But Glenn, you're letting situational reality get in the way of her story. What's wrong with you?
Come on, evidence. What are you, crazy? Use evidence?
You're letting the reality of the situation get in the way.
I know.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
This is Judy land, don't you know?
Like this time.
No, but that struck me when I read Matthew's paper this afternoon. It's exactly you can see the patterns. They're all there, but see, time and time again.
There's just enough truth.
Go ahead, Steve.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's just enough truth that if you don't dig deep, you're going to miss things. Like Evans, the woman who was with Oswald that day, she explained in her testimony that she had Lee give Mrs. Gardner the money to turn on the power. Well, because there was no power on, there was no refrigerator to defrost. But if you don't sit down and read the testimony, you're not going to catch the little white, the details. It's in the details that if you just cursory read, you're going to go, oh yeah, there's enough facts here that it sounds credible. But when you really dig, when you really look at what people are saying and the testimony and the historical record, it just doesn't add up.
Right. And no matter what the position of the author is, I'm telling the listener right now, don't necessarily take every characterization we've made about this or any other subject to heart and just accept it. Look for yourself. Always examine the extraordinary complaints. The extraordinary claims require extraordinary research. And yes, Trish, go ahead.
I actually have 2 examples that I'd like to point out on this topic. One of them was a statement from John Russell Rochelle, who is part of the Department of Labor, who actually interviewed Oswald on April 26th. And according to his affidavit, he states that Lee was wearing a suit and tie that day and was very presentable, etc., etc. This is the same day that she apparently met him at the post office. And then, look, she describes him wearing a khaki shirt. Now, for someone who doesn't drive, and according to her story, again, his stuff is in storage at the bus depot and so on and so forth, that's a lot of commuting to go around and change outfits, living out of a locker at the bus depot, and to be able to switch clothes so quickly between the 2 appointments. I'm using appointment, obviously, as a very loose term. Another thing that's really interesting is, like Steve was saying, if you read the testimony, Lillian Moret had testified that Oswald had sat at the table and was going through the phone book looking for Oswald's relatives, anybody with the name Oswald. But in her book, on 2 separate pages, 146 and 163, she actually states that Dutz is the one that gave him the list of the relatives for him to go see. And if you read Dutz's testimony, it really sounds like he, for lack of a better word, really didn't care for Lee very much and wasn't really eager to help him out. And this goes full circle to a $200 loan that Lee had mentioned in Warren Commission Exhibit 69-A. But she's saying that it was a payment for him doing illegal runs to mobsters. So again, there's just so much conflicting evidence when you're reading the actual testimony from firsthand sources to what she's claiming. It clashes.
Right. That's basically where where a lot of this falls apart is, but when you compare what the historical record states compared to what she's saying, and what it boils down to is, who do you believe?
Right.
There's a matter of credibility. Do you believe the people that were there and saw this stuff with their own eyes, and as Trish said, testified under oath, or do you believe someone that evidently has a profit motive involved?
Yeah.
Yeah, and who is a proven liar.
I won't go that
Yeah,
far.
that's
but
exactly
Mythmaker
right, and
sounds good to me.
Yep. Well, I mean, and as David writes, is pointed out to us on his website, there's over 150 times where she's been inconsistent with her, not just the story of her and Lee, but just all of the stories that have come up since of her trying to patch up all of these holes. And I mean, if she's telling the truth and was being consistent with her story, there wouldn't be hole 1 to patch.
Yeah,
Right.
and
One line
and all you have
leads
to
another to another.
Yeah, and all you have to do is have a look at the list of people, because it's Ritz's, it's all of us, that's 7, it's Chuck, that's 8. There are dozens and dozens of credible researchers who use primary evidence who are saying, no, it doesn't work. None of it works. It's small injections of fact into a largely mythical tale, like all myths.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you, Trish. Very good thing you did this afternoon by providing Barb's excellent little piece there on, which is another good example.
Thank you. It definitely deserves to be looked at. That's a very important article, and I really do. People take the time to look at that, because Barb definitely needs a tip of the hat for that article.
Yeah, she deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, and there's no way around it. It's not a question of a mistake. It's not a question of wrong year or something. She was making the story up, period.
That's right.
That's where all the facts point to. So what else can we do but follow all the evidence and what it says? I mean, that's what needs to happen, like I said, across the community. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that another researcher, Chris Simident, sent me a little fact on what the type of argument Fetzer and Baker use. It's called the Gish-Gallop technique.
That's it.
The Gish-Gallop.
I want a copy of that.
Go ahead, Carmine. Explain that.
Is there a joke I'm missing?
Well, yeah, in a way.
Okay.
But the Gish-Gallop is used to basically, like Chuck was saying, you throw so much mud at them that there's no way to counter it. You just overwhelm them with mythical ideas so that there's no way they'll have the time to come back at you, and then you criticize them for not being able to do it because no human could.
So like Jim Eugenio.
There's a lot of people, I would say, that fall under use of the Gish-Gallop on both sides.
Yes.
So now we know what to call it, at least. Thank you, Chris.
The
Gish-Gallop.
Gish-Gallop.
Yep. And once it gets into like just so many things you can't do, you're just, okay, you're using the Gish-Gallop, I'll see you.
Yeah.
It would save a lot of time.
No kidding.
Yeah, I'm trying to relate these I'm being requested, like, where's the links to the articles and all this other stuff. I'm trying to get them for people. And we are down to the last 6-7 minutes here. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. Believe it or not, that was only 2 hours. We could probably do this all night.
It feels like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. But this could be done, I'm telling you, all night. And in fact, let's give people a feel for that real quick, and I think everybody on the line will appreciate this. I want to play a little game. And it is called the Select a Page game for the Judyth Vary Baker myth. It works like this. Pick a number.
Anywhere between 50 and 549.
And what will happen is Carmine will select a page out of the Judyth Vary Baker book, Me and Lee, and
we will debunk it. No matter what page you pick, there will be something unproven on it, I contend.
Yes, absolutely. How about this? Why don't we let either Steve...
Or Steve.
I would like Steve to pick a number, because I'm guessing that he would have less familiarity with this book. Whoop.
I think some of her minions are trying to cut in.
Could be. Steve.
Yeah, is that me?
Would you like, I don't know, would you like to select a page and see what happens
Yes.
if you go to that page?
Okay, 50 and 500.
Page 249, Carmine.
Page 249. Ooh.
Yes.
What magic are we going to find here? 249.
Well, right off the bat, she refers to Jack Ruby as Sparky, and that's been kind of debunked, that he didn't go by Sparky during that time at all. It made him mad, so mad that he'd get into a fight about it.
She says, the other people in my life
Well,
did
that's
look
quick,
much...
Zach.
She says, Dr. Sherman had not bothered to contact me since that awkward incident at Dave's party. Well, the Ferry party, in which she states that Jack Martin, David Ferry, Lee Oswald, none of that has ever proven to have happened. Not a single one of those men ever mentioned that occurring. Mary Sherman never mentioned meeting them there. And why would Mary Sherman, a respected doctor, ever go to a flop house, which when people say there were experiments done there, it's totally hilarious because you need a secure and sterile environment that you can't have with a bunch of rat cages around. Sorry.
Thank you, Carmine.
No problem. It was my pleasure. We can play this game at least another 499 times.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you.
367.
Sure. You want 367, Dylan?
Oh, we're going to have to go fast. We only got so much time left. 367.
Only got a few minutes, but go ahead. Go ahead. Let's try it. 367.
Okay. Zach, feel free to jump in too, man.
I'm determined to find one that Carmine can debunk just for fun.
It up. Just give him a sec.
Listen, I don't have that much time on the air, brother. Please.
Okay.
Table of contents.
Nice. Yeah, it's the passport. It's actually one of her. Yeah. Oh well, no. You know what? I'll use one of her sources, and I'll debunk with that. By purchasing fruit and selling it to ships along the docks, Lee set up a temporary reputation as a fruit seller. That has no proof that ever happened. Where did he get the money to do this side fruit business that no one ever saw, including Morena?
Does she say what dock it was on?
No. Oh, of course not.
No.
Specific.
Oh, okay.
Why would she be specific? That's how she got bananas at lunchtime every day, though, according to Judyth Baker.
Yeah.
Why is this relevant?
Oh, no, we're just selecting a page at random. And
Yeah.
I know, but why did she include it?
Listen, if you want one of us to climb into her mind...
She likes bananas.
I defy anybody on this call to climb into her mind and explain her thought process regarding all this stuff.
I might have to listen to Harry Chapin later, 30,000 pounds of bananas.
Or some other psychic driving tape besides the 5-hour interview that we punished ourselves with.
Endured.
Endured, even a better word. Listen, before we run out of time, I want to thank Hitman. I want to thank Stephen Rowe. I definitely want to thank Glenn Vikland, who I really appreciate the work you did, sir. I'm telling you, I love it. Trish.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yes, Trish.
Thank you too, guys.
Trish Fleming, Zach Gendro, Carmine Savastano, Dylan Wade, everybody who decided to join in, everybody who's listening. I do appreciate it all. You have been listening to the 3rd episode, and there's going to be more, of JFK Assassination Myths Exposed. This was the Judyth Vary Baker special, and if you're catching it further on down the line, I hope you enjoy it.
And I'd like to say one thing to those who, after all of this, after all of our articles and all the dozens of pieces of verifiable evidence, after the me and Lee game we just played, if you still believe her, you deserve her.
Nice.
Wow, I didn't mean to silence everybody.
I was about to ask if my speakers went dead.
I think that was just, we were letting it set in. We were letting that set in a few, dozen people's minds.
I couldn't put it any better than you just did.
It was a good ending.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bumper's going to kick in, and we're going to go off the air, and then it'll be time for the Jaded Show, which I want everybody to stay tuned for on ucy.tv. And also, if you are finding this further on down the line, you can get the archives and everything else. Make a donation to me if you'd like at ucy.tv/TOE for the Ochelli Effect. There's YouTube links there. There's all kinds of stuff there. And if you look hard enough, you can still find the chat room somewhere on the thing, although it's been kind of segregated now.
I tried to get on it. It wasn't there.
Yeah, I know. It's been kind of segregated, and that's the way that is. Anyway, again, though, I want to thank all you guys who joined in, and I think we may have to do a part 3A. Because I didn't even...
We haven't beaten her enough.
Hey, never her.
No.
Just the myth. Just the myth.
Just the mythology and the universe of myths which has evolved from her, not her personally. I do not support the industry.